cold at the touch, dead in the eyes, no signs of life no more. I put your love under the knife. Leave me to die here all alone. No signs of life no more, no. A crying dove may never fly. Black and white. Yeah. Black and white. Oh, 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 oh. Just black and white. No more. Black and white, just let me go. It's only right. For all I know, it's only matter. It's calico, it's black and white. White, white, white. Just let me go. It's only right. For all I know, it's only matter. It's calico, it's black and white. White, white, white. Black and white. Yeah. Black and white. Oh, 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 oh. Just black and white. Black and white.
everyone, welcome to Simracersworld TV for round 3 of the SRW NASCAR Cup Series, the Viraco, if I could just coin that word correctly, Las Vegas 160. I'm joined by Joe Peak in the commentary booth. My name is Hasse Rømer. It is, of course, as always, an utmost pleasure to have you all along. Thank you for joining us, and well, welcome to you, Joe. It's a pleasure having you along in the booth, a real American. What are your expectations for what we're about to see here tonight?
My expectations is we're going to see some tight racing. This is a fast track with this next-gen car here today, so there's pretty much no lifting that you need to do around the circuit, meaning you can expect pack racing. It's not quite going to be what you tend to see at super speedways such as Dega or Daytona, but it'll keep things tight, and it'll make it more about your strategy than the sheer driving itself.
And that's something we like to hear here at in the booth, indeed, because that spells close and tight racing for tonight, which I think you at home watching along will be in agreed with. See and have a look at the championship standings. Oh, we got now new fancy graphics here, courtesy of the man himself, Bart. The Bart. It's Tim Perry leading. He's got a win to his name in 112 points, but he will not be on the grid tonight. Matty Sufi, though, second, tied with Ian Roots at 96 points for the Simracersworld Esports Bravo and Alpha teams. And then Hendrik de Grave and Kim Behate on 95 and 93 points respectively. So expect a very, very close fight at the top of the standings there. We got Tyler Dupont Fredericks, very close as well in the following slots. Then Robbie Lundgren and John Barnes, indeed. Rounding off the top 10, 11th in the standings, John Tusting, Kurt van Hoenacker, and Adam Wright as well, with Stuart Musselwhite 14th and Seb Hebra in 15th place. And it's Damien van Immerseel, one of the newcomers. He's 16th. And further down is some of the drivers that's found themselves in... shall we say, a bit of poor luck here and there. Austin Gretorix certainly showed that he has the pace last time around, but didn't get anything for it, really caught up in incidents, and that's how it so easily goes. Of course, as mentioned before, our sponsor for this round being Viraco, a little bit closer to the right pronunciation this time around, which is, of course, a maker of very, very fine sim rigs indeed. There is a link to their webpage in the description below, and it's certainly stuff for any sim racer to drool about. Anyways, with that said, Joe, I think it's time for us to go look at some live pictures of cars and drivers as well, going around in circles, I was about to say, although that's a little bit unfair, isn't it?
Yeah, there's always a little bit more to it than that. There's the old joke that it's just turning left, and yeah, you could diminish it to that, but as we've seen, various drivers have tried to come over to NASCAR from other disciplines and have not necessarily been successful. So there's always a little bit more to it than you'd expect as we're looking at the 777 of Gosling here. And Paul actually has done quite well in the qualifying. He's got it up onto third. We're just in the warm-up, so I expect him to be in a good position. With these tracks where it is less about trying to make overtakes, since they're going to have that slipstream to help them, starting up front is a big help, since you don't have to worry about getting caught up in anybody else's mess back in the field.
Indeed, very much so. Let's see if we can bring forth qualifying results. There it is. It's Matty Sufi. We'll just do ourselves a favor and hide the ticker. Meanwhile, we're still watching Paul Gosling go around. But Matty Sufi on pole position by 17 thousandths of a second ahead of John Barnes. And the top 6 here within a 10th of a second. And that tells us quite a lot about just how flat out it is all the way around, Joe. But also just how close the race we can expect here.
Indeed. And the fact that we're going into the night, you can see the lights are just coming on recently. That means it's going to be a cooler track. The tires are going to go off a lot less, faster speeds, and that's going to keep it all the closer all race long. If we were racing during the day, you could see some of the tires going off a bit. In fact, the lap times would drop more drastically, but this will mean that the runs can go a lot longer, all kinds of fun things that, well, like you said, just keep it incredibly tight and give us a lot of tension and excitement to watch.
Absolutely so. And that's, as I said before, the makings of this series in itself and NASCAR as a whole. It's really about that excitement that you get with the field being bunched up close together and often for long extended periods of time. And my experience with it is, as a driver as well, that the levels of concentration needed with cars like this and oval racing in general is just on another level. The margins of error are so small, and it really doesn't take much to make a mess of everything here.
You really should have been practicing racing around other drivers, like you see Tustin doing here in the 999, as he's trying to hang out there with the likes of Bram in the 284. Being used to being near the other drivers will be key, and also understanding how the draft not only gives you the runs, but affects the handling of the cars in the corners. It might be flat out, but you can still get loose, especially if you get the air taken off of you, or somebody will come up sometimes behind your bumper. You have to remember, they have the bubble now modeled here in iRacing, so you can make people loose by kind of positioning yourself in a place that'll take the air off of the spoiler.
And that's another thing. It's not only a race of strategy, but also in-race tactics, you could say. And it's on many levels here. We are indeed getting closer and closer to the end of this warm-up session. Just under 3 minutes till we see our green flag. Of course, I think that was implemented here, this slight warm-up period, to give us time to actually get into the broadcast, because it's been a thing before, and returning viewers will know as well that it's been ever so slightly rushed. Before. It isn't the case anymore, that much is certain.
Yeah, glad to have a little bit of time to kind of get used to it and watch how everybody's doing. The thing about these warm-ups is, like I said, it's valuable not only to us, but the drivers as well, because the more time you can spend being around all your competitors, the better you're going to fare in today's race, and understanding how everybody else races around you. Adam Wright, obviously getting a little bit of experience as he's going to get overtaken by DeGrave. So in the warm-up, though, it looks like DeGrave is our quickest car, interestingly, and it's a much bigger margin than what we saw in the qualifying, with more than 1/10 of a second over Tustin in the 999.
Interesting to see just where he found that sort of pace. Mind you, it's a fixed setup, of course, and it's just to say that kind of gap isn't easily come by. Of course, the right timing and a bit of a gap to drive into a car ahead that you can close into and sort of take advantage of the slipstream, of course, could make for rather massive advantages in the end. And that's another thing. Some of the differences you'd see in time, you say, that's a minuscule difference if it was a road race, but on these ovals, 1/10 of a second is kind of a lot here.
Absolutely. Even on a mile and a half or like this, where you're looking at 30-second lap times, 1/10 of a second makes a big difference. And you'll want to watch that. If we get long green flag runs, trying to figure out when to come in for tires is going to be key, because they do make a difference on the lap times. The longer you stay out, the slower you're going to start going. So much like you do see on the roadside, undercuts and overcuts play a big part of the unfolding of the race and who can come away with the checkers today.
Such truth indeed, and it's something we've seen on numerous occasions as well, that the drivers that just has that tactical and strategic edge as well will be the ones running away with it more often than not. Of course, a lot of the work has to be done out there on track and in traffic, but there is an element to it that you can really both win and lose the race in the pit lane. And if you make a wrong decision, if you on any call, and it can be so many, really have to be able to make those split-second decisions in terms of strategy, both under greens, but also with those caution pit stops.
Yeah, cautions are the great equalizer, really allowing you to look the hero or the fool in equal terms, depending on how you play it. And that's what I think makes this so much harder as a driver, sim racing compared to real, because you're doing all that yourself, as it looks like we're gridding up.
Indeed we are. Indeed we are. And it's 160 laps of goodness from Las Vegas. Let's hope there won't be too much gambling with everybody's safety here tonight, because we want to see as much green flag running as humanly possible. Just to go through the grid order again. Matty Sufi ahead of Paul, I was about to say Paul Barnes and John Gosling. It's very much the other way around. It's John Barnes and Paul Gosling. Then Bram van Eyften, Austin Gretorix there for Quantum Racing, of course. And then Seb Herber in the Simracersworld Esports Team Bravo machine. Then Yves Fredericks, John Tusting, Stuart Musselwhite, Hendrik de Graaf, Kim Behate, Damien van Immerseel, and Ian Roots there in the, let's see if it shall be his lucky number 13 is his start position today on the grid. Ahead of Kurt van Honacker, Adam Wright, Jens Hoosens, and Leven up the Beek. Mind you, a few of the drivers, 17 we have on the grid today, Joe, didn't set a time in qualifying, but with a field of this size, you reckon it's going to be too much of a hassle coming from the back of things?
I don't think it'll be too difficult. The bigger thing is how they deal with being back there. Do they plan to try and charge their way through? Or are they doing this intentionally to just kind of hang back and stay out of trouble? That's what I'm going to be watching for on Goosens and Up the Beek to see how they deal with basically being chasing 15 cars ahead of them. And if they want to take the win, they're going to have to take all 15 of them to be able to come home with the victory. But we'll get one pace lap here, and then we're going to go racing for hopefully 160 laps. We'll see if we get that overtime in the end.
Hopefully not. I mean, it's not something we've seen yet this season, and it seems these next-gen cars might be that little bit easier to get around in one piece, though we have also seen examples of drivers having a fair bit of trouble with keeping them in a straight line. That's especially once the tires get overheated, and that was... I reckon that was a bigger problem last week than it's going to be this week, just given that it's not quite as technical here as Las Vegas. But that will indeed reveal itself once the truck of pace is peeled off to the left. Into the pits it's going to go. And in a very short time, indeed, we're going to go green, green, green. Here from Vegas, it's now Matty Sufi controlling the field. And he's going to want to time it perfectly. He's gone. And I think he's got a good run there on John Barnes. Paul Gosling, I think, got ever so slightly detached. And then, of course, Joe, we're looking further down the field to see if everybody slots into that single file safely.
Yeah, I'm seeing pretty much everyone single file first. Side by side seems to be for 8th place. That's Musselwhite, who's going to go by Tusting, who's kind of moving backwards right now. He's already letting Bayet by as well as Roots.
Yeah, indeed, John Tusting. You can see what it means as well to be caught on the outside, on the high side of things, and no cover as John Tusting tucks in as well. And a bit of action up ahead here with Austin Gretorix, and they're going for it here. And this is what you can do, though. Once you get a partner and you can start working together, you can gain that advantage with a little bit of slipstream as well. Are they going to take it 3 wide here? It's early days. Oh, Sufi in the middle, I think, is having none of that at all. But this is excellent. Paul Gosling getting solded to by the 13 car of Austin Gretorix. And then... Yep, sorry, go on, Joe.
I was going to say Barnes got himself a great run, but I don't think he's going to be able to get away from them. In the meantime, boy, Gosling is suddenly falling like a rock. Nobody is willing to pair up with him. Everybody's just basically ducking underneath and streaming by.
Yeah, he's a sitting duck up there, really. And the 197 is now closing in that Yves Fredericks, but he's lost a lot of positions. Really also showing just how quickly it can go here. The Flemish cars, the 86, the 87, trying to move up as well. It's been a lively start here on lap 4 of the 160 we've got to do.
So, obviously, this tells me that you don't need to panic too much because things can change quickly. If you start losing positions, just going to take it in stride. A lot of oval racing is about that give and take and understanding that you can't have the lead every step of the way in most cases. You just kind of have to understand that if someone really wants to be aggressive, let them go. You'll get them back later.
The patience game is really there to be played, and a lot of gains to be made as well in that sense, because it's so easy, I think, to get impatient in the situations right now, and also just to feel the stress and the heat of a race like this in its early stages. Everybody's still bunched up. And something very different from what we saw last week as well, in the fact that everybody's still very tightly bunched up together. The 197 almost making contact with someone they're having to take evasive action. And I wonder, Joe, and you might be able to provide me with an answer here, because I'm not quite sure if it's the same for the next-gen cars as the older generation machines, that you had to sort of duck out of the slipstream to cool down to avoid the engine blowing up.
At a track like this, I don't think they'll be experiencing that as much, especially because they've got pretty cool air temperatures here right now. Unless you're really pushing somebody completely around the track, I think they should be okay. And I honestly would not advise trying to bump draft in the corners through here. It's not that steep a banking.
Oh, certainly not. Indeed, seeing the effects of both slipstream and in turn also the bump drafts that are being handed out further down in the field. Expected to only matter more as time progresses. Oh, someone's on the high side there, and we've had our first problem, and it's sort of gone under our noses. But Damien van Immerziel has jumped to the pits for some reason. I'm not quite sure just what happened.
It looks like he didn't start the race, because I haven't seen any laps marked down for him yet. So he's essentially starting out 6 laps down. He's going to have to hope for a number of lucky dogs to get back in this thing.
Absolutely. So, talk about abysmal times. We might have had a disconnect on the race start or something like this. It's not quite something that I'm sure of.
I think you're right.
Yeah, so it would...
I see it. I see it now. He had a disconnect just as we were gridding up. So unfortunately, the internet decided not to play nice right when he needed it.
Internet giveth, internet taketh away, and certainly on the receiving end of that one. That's the way.
You can tell. Sorry, just what I was talking about with the pack racing here. Other than Damien, everybody is pretty much together. I think we have got one more with Van Honecker in the 07 who's dropped off the back. I'm not sure what happened to that, but otherwise 15 cars are split by 2.5 seconds still.
It's incredibly close indeed. Nobody's really able to give it a... Oh, look at the contact there between... That was Rømer, I think, and Behate. And...
We're 10 laps in, boys. We don't need to be running people all the way down to the bottom like that. That was an aggressive defense down to the line. They're not allowed to pass underneath that white line there on the backstretch. They have to make their overtakes above it. And for some reason, he took him all the way down and just about shoved him across it, pit maneuvering himself in a way.
Yeah, I wasn't even able to recall the actual images because there wasn't an overtake, there wasn't contact, there wasn't anything to make it show up in our replay event viewer. So bit of a shame we couldn't see just how close that actually was. But that certainly tells me that some of these drivers are not afraid to play with fire. Although, as what you might know, it comes with the risk of getting burned and. Oh, that was a little bit of a slap over the wrist there before, but all still good, all still well and safe. Good evening, Thomas. Welcome too, and nice to have you along again. We have been missing you over the first 2 rounds. That's all I will say. Been missing your company. And here are the boss man, Ian Roots, in the 194 car, getting busy for himself as well. He's got Jens Husens on the outside. He's got Yves Fredericks on the inside. Now on the inside of his teammate, and Roots is clear.
Oh, but Gosling's coming back through, and that tells you just how much things can change here, because Gosling, remember, started up at the front. He essentially went all the way to the back of this pack. Now he's trying to push his way back forward, and he's having to do a real job of it because Goossens is not letting him through. Great shot off the corner using that high side. We have to remember, this is progressive banking here. So even when you run high, sometimes you can hang tough with the other cars, especially now that the tires have worn in a little bit. And he gets very close to that 777 down through 1 and 2.
And someone in behind, I think that might be the 18 of Stuart Musselwhite. He wasn't having any of that. He had a big run on the 777. But it wasn't to be anything here still. John Barnes had a Sufi, Vernuyften, Hebra, and Gretorix. That's your top 5 at the moment. The keen-eyed viewer will have noticed that we've had a bit of an update to the graphics as well. Which, courtesy of Ian Roots, has cleaned it up quite a bit. and it's enabled us to do a few things with it that we wanted to indeed. So expect it to evolve and change once the wizard that is Jazz Dracut gets the hand of it. Here, Hendrik de Grave that we haven't really had a look at yet here, but let's go for an onboard shot. And that tells you as well, Joe, quite a bit about just how much lifting you have to do in the pack here, and just the small details of something like knowing when to lift, not to lose too much time there, so you can see the battle up ahead. That's the other Flemish car going high there. But just to round off my question, it's the small details that really make a big difference in the end here on the oval.
Yeah, just like we were talking about with the lap times being separated by hundreds, thousands sometimes. It's a game of inches in oval racing. As a big lift from the 86 causes DeGrave to have to get out of it himself. You got to be heads up constantly, especially with how these guys are racing early on. Nobody's willing to sit still except for maybe the top four. I haven't seen them swapping around all that much in these last few laps. So I wonder if they kind of got the idea and have figured out, you know what, it's better if we work together, not risk the cars and just log some laps. There's a long ways to go before we get to the checkers.
Stuart Musselwhite was passed by a number of cars, but he's in the pits now. And so is Adam Wright. And I have to say I'm a little bit at a loss to just why that is. Because there doesn't seem to have been any incidents. We haven't had any trouble so far.
We did, but we somehow didn't have a caution. Apologies, I completely missed this too. The 18 got tipped and then went up the hill and hit Adam Wright. Those two got serious damage.
Oh my, well that tells us something, but just which reason that we've been able to recall those images. But I know that Joe has a different view than me because he can actually see things in the iRacing sim. And you might be able to tell me which lap it was on.
Yes, that. Let me dig that up for you while you're continuing to cover our leaders here.
Yes, indeed, of course. So it's still De Grave or Flemish with the Hateful Company as well. Austin Gretorix has gone up a single place, so Bram van Eyften. Sophie's down in second. They've switched positions, him and John Barnes for Quantum. And what I wanted to bring up before as well is that there is sort of a gap opening up behind. I think that is Ian Roots. Then Fredericks is still on. No, they are still more or less on here though. No. Paul Gosling 2 seconds down on Eve Fredericks, and he's alongside Jens Hoosens here. So that might be a bit of a problem for those cars. Mind you, it's very, very hard to close these gaps. Once you're really out of the slipstream, you're sold. But up here, it is close as ever.
That was lap 15, by the way, that we had that incident. See if we could pull that one up. But yeah, continuing to watch this front group, it really does seem to me that the leaders have decided it's time to settle down, and these guys did not. Now, it's not just this big damage moment that you got to worry about, because you're going to see that 18 comes away very badly. Yeah, right there.
That is one huge moment indeed. Stuart Musselwhite, major contact with the wall, and I have absolutely no clue how we didn't get a caution period. Of course, it does make sense because he's probably slid down upon the apron and kept on moving in that sense, and that's kept the yellow flags away. But it's a hefty hit indeed, and of course that's another whammy to get hit with here, Joe. Is the fact that of course there is the incident, but the fact that there is no caution afterwards is just going to make it all the more costly for you.
Yeah, he's going to go many laps down. He's trying to take some repairs. Looks like Adam Wright called it a day and took it into the garage. And not only that, we know what I was alluding to there as we were watching the replay is those involved that didn't come into the pits, they're also probably dealing with just the tiniest bit of damage at this point. And with this being a flat-out track, that means now you've got to... and there you see right there, yeah, some contact. You're going to lose some pace in a straight line because the car is not perfect.
Very much so. Even with the repairs, there is going to be lasting damage, even though they might have fixed it. I'm not sure if the next-gen car, one of those cars in the one of the recent iRacing updates, they've added the fact that a lot of the damage is going to be completely repairable. It might take some time, but the car is going to be able to come out and be competitive once again, which is always nice.
Well, unlike the clips that we see in sports cars and Formula One, in NASCAR, it's Bondo and sledgehammers, so it'll be a little bit different type of repairs on these cars. So they're never going to be completely perfect, unfortunately, because you can't just clip on a completely new piece of bodywork.
It's going to be more mending and less repairing, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
To put it in those words. Stuart Musselwhite has left the pit lane, but he's been in there for about 5 minutes after that incident. Lap 26 we're upon here. Matty Sufi, Bram van Uyften, both of them playing a very, very patient game. And I'd say, Joe, that the top 5, 6, 7 drivers here, all in with a shot. Basically everyone who's still in touch with that leading pack could be running away with this one at the end of it.
Very much so. And the 27 is going to poke his nose up to the top, 87 of DeGrave. Going to try and challenge on Greaterix. Looks like he's got some help with him in Bayet, but now the 86 is going to back out as well. So DeGrave's going to have to do this on his own, see if he could use that slingshot, which he does nicely. That momentum, once you learn how the momentum games works, that helps you a ton, and he slots down in front right away to show that that position is now his, and he's got himself fourth.
Was an experienced move by Hendrik de Grave there, because he just about managed to get in front and then wasted no time at all putting his car down on the inside line, making sure that they didn't go too wide again. Of course, it can be costly and you can easily find yourself losing time there as Greaterix really tries to make available a bit of space there. He looks aggressive in that sense. I don't think it necessarily was. But it's just, if you can get your nose in there, it's there, you know, and the car in front is going to have to live with it. But those, when they come around and come across on one another on the straights even, that's often when we see the contact. That's often when we see the incidents. So a plea from me and from everyone, basically, I think, is to just keep it steady and to keep at least holding the lines when you go for the offensive move and not to check around too much. Now the 87 of the Grave comes on the high side and opens himself up for assault. And I think Greaterix is right on through there. And so is Kim Behate.
Huge run.
Yeah.
He had a monster run on Van Uyften and just unfortunately kind of threw it away as soon as he started to go high. It wasn't enough momentum that he could swing around that outside. And when that happened, like you saw, everybody else was easily able to demote him. And it's not over yet because he's still falling backwards a while. I think that's Herber, who's, going to give him a little bit of the door. And thankfully they'll get away with that.
That was a close call indeed. If they didn't make contact, they could have been no more than a few inches from one another in that situation. And you can see the help arriving there in the form of Herber's teammate. That's Ian Roots in the 194, trying to get involved, or maybe not. But of course, as you mentioned before, bump drafting here can be quite a lot more difficult because of the tri-oval nature of the track and the fact that there only is really one straight here. And across the start-finish line is just one long gradual turn. Although it does turn enough that if you try to get your nose in, you got to be very, very precise and careful as well, not to bring the car ahead out of balance, which is easily done even if you're being careful. So let's see, there's a bit of a gap opening up as well, and that was behind, that was in front of Herber. And the top 5 is now beginning to have a little bit of an advantage, although I think that is not going to be enough for them to really pull away. And as soon as Behate starts to lift, these cars are going to get dragged right into it.
Yeah, I think that little gap that we see is not quite enough that they can make the distance, though. They are continuing to work together quite a bit. And yeah, Herber has already got it down, cut in half, essentially. Behate certainly seems to want to make some moves because he keeps poking his nose left and right. Doesn't seem to feel he's confident enough that he could try and make something stick.
Oh, indeed, it's battling with an experienced gentleman in Austin Greaterix as well as we can see the battle between Hendrik Graveler and Ian Roots, who I think got past as well. Something's happened with Kurt van Honacker. Gone into the pits. I don't know exactly what happened. He might have overshot his pit lane. Have to tow in there. Leaving up the beak is in the pits as well at the moment. Comes in here.
Kurt was already well behind the pack before he came in. So I'm not sure. He must have gotten some damage early on, and I think it appears to me that maybe he just felt like this wasn't his day. Since they have no spare car, he didn't think there was much to gain by staying out there. So that brings us down to 13.
Surprisingly so, and it's been strange one of these. I hadn't got a single incident really on my viewer, and I've just checked if there was something wrong, if I needed a refresh or something. Nope, nothing. It's just nothing that it's decided was worthy of a replay. We're coming up to the first 40 laps to be completed here.
Oh, do we have a challenge for third, maybe?
So it could see Greater X.
There he goes.
Found the inside line on the 284. Needs to be quick on closing the door there. He doesn't on Behate. And this could be a slippery slope for Bram van Aerten if he doesn't do something about it. And he does indeed, but you can see the run of the SRW esports machine. Almost getting the squeeze there on the inside. You got to be very, very attentive on holding your inside line down the back straight. Really allow you to go up high, because if you do so, someone's going to be there with the big run that you can have there. And it's something we've seen on multiple occasions already so far this evening here as well. The grab caught on the outside of Seb Herbera. And another great fight here. It's been a really good opening 40 laps here.
Herbera's going to be able to hold on to that sixth. And, you know, without any cautions so far, I kind of wonder if we'll get anybody trying to gamble and pit a little bit early. They can go about 60 laps on these tanks. So if they want, they could still run a while to run them dry. But like I said, if you pit early and it stays green, you're going to get a big jump on all your competitors.
Very good point indeed. Roots gets the slingshot on the 87. They're all just queuing up, still behind John Barnes. Do you reckon it's a thing about also trying to be full throttle a little bit less and thus save that little bit extra fuel and might be able to gain something on the pit stop, or just to have that in advantage on the strategy?
Well, so that's where it's a bit weird with NASCAR, because it takes longer to do the tires. And since you can do it at the same time, the saving of the fuel won't mean a whole lot unless you have a fuel race late on in this event. So it could help you down the line. If anything, if I was one of the drivers behind, I'd be thinking more about those tires more than lifting to save the fuel. Just trying to take an easy line, not trying to challenge those around you by hanging out behind those ahead, lifting and being very easy on the rubber so that you've got more underneath you come late in the run.
Good point indeed. It also seems to be one of the things that's really separated the good from the great in this series so far. And our last season's champion, not racing with us sadly this season, but Sergio Hernandez, an absolute master of just that, being able to match everybody else's pace, but just taking that a little bit less life out of the tires while doing it, and thus always having a little bit extra to go with at the end of the race. It became his trademark. It took him to 2 championships in this series so far. And should he ever opt to return, there would probably be a good chance of him picking up more than... Look at the Flemish car there in the inside of Greater X. Oh my word! Just about managing it, but that was a late send of a move. As we have another look at it here.
He saw a lane open. Nicely done. Again, very risky to me, especially. This is still quite early in this race. And there's some guys making some big moves there, but it did give Behate third place, and he's just picking them off one by one. He's jumped up from 11th on the grid. He's now on the podium, so he's in a good position. He's out of much of the trouble. There's fewer cars ahead where if something erupts that he's got less to avoid, but it's a case of what comes around goes around. If he's going to race others hard like that, he can expect to get that return to him at some point.
that's a good point as well. That if you if you're overly aggressive towards the other drivers, at some point someone's gonna return the favor, and it's gonna be it's not gonna look nice in the end, is it? But that's it's all a part of this. It's all a part of racing, and NASCAR also, maybe even more so earlier in its lifespan, it's been known for also all sorts of drama between drivers, so to say, both in the car and when getting out of it as well, and the rebellious roots of the series as well is sort of made for the fact that it's sort of in the spirit of the series even to see a little fisticuffs here and there, and it's a great spectacle, to say the least.
Well, it is fitting because the very first live broadcast in America of NASCAR ended with a fist fight down in the infield between two drivers at Daytona. So, and that was on live television. You can imagine the impression that left, and well, that's why you have as many fans that are eager to see that these days.
It's also some it's the drivers are also a little less polished, and in terms of media training and stuff like that, they're maybe a little bit more honest than what you'd find in, say, Formula One or something like that, where there is a lot of media training going on, and this sort of a more honest approach to the drivers and their opinions on things and those sort of things, I think at least, is something that also draws in fans. And of course, this is also a spectator-friendly sport in the sense that you go to a NASCAR race, you can sit there, you can have your seats, you can basically catch every moment of the race all around the track. It's something quite different to road racing, where you catch a glimpse of the field passing through every 90 seconds or so. In terms of how that is as a viewer, obviously being a Dane, we don't have oval tracks here in Denmark per se. I've never been to one myself, but this is just something that I could imagine quite different indeed.
Yeah, the only oval track that I've ever been to where you can't see the whole thing is Indianapolis, but that's an experience all in its own, and I grew up in and around there, and definitely that one has a special place in my heart. But right now, here at Vegas, where it's a lot smaller, Barnes has been the one in control, and he could see everything, but all he's been seeing is basically open track for probably the vast majority of the laps at this point.
Yeah, absolutely so. If he doesn't spend too much time looking in his mirror, I don't think you'll find it too stressful indeed. Seems to be quite comfortable with Matty Soufian behind there. Kim Behate has been making moves, but you just have to wonder whether it doesn't make sense for him to sort of settle down here and you've mentioned it as well. Sort of some of the moves we've seen, fairly aggressive. Well, is it gonna be? I mean, for me at least, it's gonna be too early for any sort of deciding moves in terms of winning the race, and all it's gonna cost someone is absolutely losing it at this point. But that's how it is, of course. We've had 51 laps of green flag racing. We've had a single incident that somehow didn't provoke a yellow flag, although it was quite the incident indeed. And let's see if we can get another shot of it. This, of course, it's a bit of time ago now, so it'll take a second or two for the replay to delve into our archives. If ever, like we wasn't quite gonna be in for that sort of treat right now, and I do apologize. Anyway, back to the front of the field, and it is John Barnes. As Muse says, not the John Barnes, which of course a legendary European footballer, but a good pun indeed.
Yes. As a side note, you had me curious, and I was like, is there 0 ovals over in Denmark? And I could not find any, so I guess you're right.
There is 0 ovals in Denmark, and even just the number of racetracks in Denmark, I think, can indeed be counted on one hand.
There were 7 that I found, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's very close indeed. I don't know to which degree they count in go-kart tracks. If such, there might be a few more here and there, but it's really not a lot. But Denmark does have a stock car championship. That's very, very true. We have the Thunder car class, which is something actually quite similar, quite close to whatever formulas raced in NASCAR. The stock chassis. Everybody then runs, and of course engine as well. Something we haven't seen and something we've failed to mention though, but I'm fornøjden in this quartet of cars, including Ian Roots, Steve Fredericks, and John Tusting, I think have sort of been detached from the front of the field here. They're now off by a second and a half here.
Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, if I was among these drivers, I'd start thinking outside the box because they've lost touch, which means they don't seem to have the pace comparatively. So you're not going to do it on track. You might as well take the risk, come in, pit, and see if you could catch them just by putting on some fresh rubber. We haven't had a caution still at this point. While there is the danger, you got to gamble, because if you just keep doing the same thing the leaders are doing, you're not going to catch them.
Good point. Some of these drivers further down might be the first to react to this, bring their cars in that little bit earlier. It's worth noting also that I'm not quite sure how the tires are going to look after a fuel stint here. They have 4 sets of tires available to them. The question is how many of those are going to get in use. But of course, if it's not really a net time loss.
Well, it's for reference, they were running 30.5s, 30.6s the first few laps of this race. They're now running 31.2s up at the front. So it'll definitely net you enough that you could easily jump them if they're not paying attention. Now, if they come in and 1 lap after, it may get you a little ground and you might not be able to get past them. So you're going to have to catch them by surprise, come on in, get some tires so they don't notice for a lap or two so that you can really use what you've got.
Yeah, certainly a big advantage here, and Hendrik de Graaf is the first one to come in. At least first of the regular stubbers. Jens Hoosens is in here as well, so I think he'd be the very first of them. Paul Gosling is in. Both Hoosens and Gosling by now... Oh, no, I'm sorry, my mistake. There's none of them are left. They're all on...
Hoosens is, I think.
Yeah. Barnes coming in as well.
See, Barnes was on the ball. He saw other people pull the trigger and felt that that's the best time for him to try and follow suit, because he doesn't want to get caught out by just lapping while everybody else has fresh rubber underneath them and is able to go so much faster. Again, he does put himself at risk of being caught a lap down if we get a caution, but I think that's a risk that he's willing to take. Sufi going to stay out. So is Bahate. Yeah, all these other guys are just going to be losing time from here on out. And let's see who's the first to get out here.
Good point. Don't think they'll be worrying too much about the caution coming at this particular moment, given the spread that we have on the field at this time already. On lap 60, got 100 laps left here of the Viraco Las Vegas 160, and another driver is pulling into the pits as well. I think that's actually the rest of the field, more or less.
Ooh, Greater X stays out.
Greater X stays out. Yeah, that's a bit of a bold move here, but it could see him detached. Because if you're saying about 0.7 of a second per lap, then staying out 3-4 laps extra, well, that's gonna bring you out well out of the slipstream of those that took that earlier stop. We're comfortably within the pit stop window as well here, so yeah.
Barnes is the one sitting pretty, frankly. De Graaf is back out, but he's still 2.5 seconds behind him, so he's outside of that slipstream. I think Ian Roots is just getting up to speed now, so I'm not exactly sure how far back he's going to sit, but Barnes is our highest driver to have pitted. Sufi just exiting now. I think he's going to jump him. Yeah, he's got so much more pace.
Here comes Sufi out the pits. Barnes is going to have a huge run. There's no defending that from Matty Sufi whatsoever. He's probably not even going to be able to tuck into the slipstream. But now, of course, the drivers that pitted later, should we have another green stint here, they'll be able to go quicker for that little bit longer. We'll see if that changes any of the dynamics we've seen so far in this race. Here comes Austin Greatorex. It's gonna get passed as well by the flying John Barnes, a second or so ahead of Matty Sufi now, 2.5 seconds down to Hendrik de Grave there. Austin Greatorex, though, actually did a great job on the pit stop. Might have done so a little bit shorter, but when I'm looking on the pit time, actually no shorter than the drivers around him. He's managed to come out ahead. I say that ahead of Sufi, but it looks like he's going to lose the position to the 64 now. All depends on just how patient Sufi is there, and they're gaining on John Barnes as well. Barnes, of course, wants to make sure that he can make his tires last, and he's not going to push overly when he's in the lead here, and do you expect to see the rest of the leading bunch sort of regroup here?
Well, it'll depend on what kind of pace they can run. Again, I was talking earlier about managing your tires. If you push hard here early on, and I'm seeing a bunch of them running all the way around the bottom throughout the entire lap. Now, yes, that's the shorter way around, but that's also the more abrasive to your tires. Remember, it's also shallower at the bottom of the banking. So they're going to chew them up, and if they don't catch them quickly, they're not going to catch them.
Nice words indeed. You can see Ian Roots now 8.8 seconds off of the leader. I think a lot of these drivers will just be hoping for a caution at some point to bring things together again. But it just doesn't look like it now. We have a leading trio, and then 2 seconds down, 2.5 seconds more or less, to Hendrik de Grave. Seb Herber very close to him. Then another second or so, 2 seconds that is, down to Kim Behate. And a bit of spread here over the rest of the lap. What works best? That certainly doesn't work at all with the initials, so it's car numbers indeed. You get an overview of the track map and just where the cars are. But also that shows a bit of just how big a gap 2 seconds is, of course, because of the speeds we're traveling at on these ovals. Flying around, a gap of half a second is going to be, in terms of pure distance, going to be quite a gap to close. And that's, of course, also why we're working with these minuscule margins, as we saw in qualifying as well.
And the drivers that pitted, it looks like a little bit earlier, did manage to take better advantage. De Greve there in fourth, gained a little bit. Unfortunately, like you said, he's got that gap up to the lead trio, so didn't quite pan out exactly as he hoped. But John Barnes, 8-lap old tires versus Greatorex, 5-lap old tires. Now, that hurts him in the sense that he has 3 more laps on him. Hopefully that's not enough, because they're going to even out quite a bit as the stint goes on. But it kept Barnes from losing out too much. And that's why I say he reacted at the right time. He saw someone go in and said, okay, I can't put myself at risk here. I gotta come in and play what they're playing at.
That's also the position you're in as the race leader, that if someone takes that gamble from further on, you sort of want to make sure you cover your own behind and make sure that you don't get caught out by whatever strategies other drivers are playing at, and that's
exactly.
And that's it's a wise choice. It's a wise decision, I think, from John Barnes to make sure that he covers off. But you'll see 3 laps. It's a minute and a half of racing. You would really not expect it to mean all that much in the end. We'll see as the stint goes on here. Lap 70.
For reference, from what I found racing around, my best lap came on lap 2. So you do start to just drop bit by bit as things go on. Like you said, it's not going to be huge, but those 3-lap difference did mean at least a little bit at the start of the stint. And unfortunately, it didn't allow him to stay far enough away that he could drop these 2 behind him, which is probably the main thing he was hoping for, because he'd rather just control this race without having to worry about the slipstream allowing them an easy pass. They continue to ride the bottom, though, all the way around the track as we now head back to Ian Roots, who definitely lost out instead. He's all the way back in 12th, the very back of the last pack. In fact, he's the last one on the lead lap right now.
Yeah, and of an anticlimax. Had a good qualifying session, Ian, but of course, qualifying in these races doesn't mean all that much. Now he's going on the high side of the 777. What you will get here in these parts of the field is the joy of racing, indeed, here on the ovals, and it doesn't really matter if you're doing street stocks, trucks, or these next-gen cars. It is a big blast. I'll tell you what, Joe, I actually won my first ever oval race officially in the street stocks. It's quite a while ago now, and I, of course, didn't win my second and third, and of course, so. But I did win my very first one, and it gave me the chance to retire with a 100% win rate, and I didn't take the chance, and I'm not gutted because I've had a lot of fun times in the ovals. Indeed, never really progressed from street stock though. But with all the NASCAR I've been commentating on, and also all the content that I've actually been buying and realized that I haven't been really racing on, it's something I've been wanting to get more and more into. So hopefully we had a plan. I'll just tell you one other thing, though. Last season we had a plan that I should take part in one of the special events of the season. That would be the Charlotte 400, which I think is going to be the plan that I hop out of the comms booth into a car and take part. Certainly, I would love.
You actually have one up on me. I've yet to get my first oval win in official racing. I've had some of the fun, the Carburetor Cup and stuff like that, but never been able to top the charts on the circle tracks in any official series yet. So you've achieved more than me.
Impressively so. Might have something to do with the fact that I was racing at a time when most of the Americans were sleeping.
Yeah, that'll help.
That'll certainly help.
That said, I've watched the Finns in the World Cup, and there's some Europeans that are very fast on ovals, so don't count them out.
No, I would imagine so. But when talking about Finns, that's not fair. Seem to have something different than the rest of us. Back to the race, it's still the leading skill, indeed, big skill, and what the Finns called sisu as well.
Yeah, there you go.
John Barnes, Austin Greatorex, and Maddie Sufi. Still the lead trio. Still nothing has changed up here. Greatorex, great job on the pit stop indeed. And it's not the same aggressive Austin Greatorex that we saw earlier in the race. Measured now. Is sitting there knowing that he is in prime position to be able to pick up fruits at the end of this one if he just keeps his cool. And that's also the sort of measurement that you might actually need to sort of know that sometimes you have to take a chance here and there to be there when it matters. And also, as we've seen, that first round of pit stops has really caused the first couple of splits as well in the field here.
This has gone green once again since the very beginning of the race. So as long as this continues, they don't have any reason to try and swap around and wear out their tires. You can see this group back there with Roots still trying to pick his way up through the couple that he does have in range. I mean, gosh, the gap is what at this point? They got 5 seconds between 6th and 5th, which is monstrous in oval terms. So the three up at the front basically are waiting for a caution, because if they start streaking away, if they start pushing hard here and using up their tires, if we get a caution, yes, they can come in for tires and that will even things out. But if they wind up in a situation where they don't want to come in, say we get a caution very late, then, well, they're on more worn tires than all those behind them. So it's kind of something where in oval racing, it goes against that racer's instinct to just dominate and push hard and get away from everybody. You kind of have to get far enough away that you've got your own little spot on the track, and then from there, ease it back and just run with your group and wait for the race to come to you, as they say.
Excuse me, that's one of the points and the parts where I find oval racing quite similar to cycling, actually, because it's all that waiting game that you just have to play. You have to make sure you don't burn your matches too early on. I just wonder, because the gap down to Hendrik de Grave and Seb Hebra keeps on growing as well. And if these three aren't really pushing, you'd expect the following cars to be able to close into that gap. They're making no inroads really whatsoever, and it's a very steady gap at the moment, just around those 4.5 seconds. Do you reckon the guys behind are just trying to wait it out for a caution as well and make sure they also have something to shoot with when it happens, or are these two, for instance, on their limit and not just able to catch up?
Well, I'm watching them, and they've definitely picked up the wide to inside line instead of the complete inside line that we saw them using earlier. So I do think that they're kind of holding up at this point, preserving the tires. Watch them. See, they're not all the way out to the outside, but it's definitely farther inside than they were before. Swinging it down, just taking what is the more traditional racing line, and then letting it come all the way out here, all the way to the wall. If you watch the leaders, they're still running that bottom line, which, again, surprises me a little bit. I would think they'd also want to try and preserve their tires a little bit. If we jump up to them now, they're all the way down to the bottom practically here on the back stretch, which means that it's a so much tighter line, so much more friction on those tires as you steer in. And yeah, not drifting out onto the front stretch either. So they're going to be using up their stuff, but they're running a shorter line, whereas De Greve and Heberer are basically just kind of chilling out back here. And that might also be why they're losing a little bit of time, because I wonder if we're seeing that bottom line is the quick way around right now. Oval racing really does rely on that dynamic track so much more, with how much it can change over the course of the race.
That's a very good, very good point. Just doing stuff in the background. It's a multitasking. It's a multitasking task, if ever there was one, sitting here and doing the broadcast while commentating. Sometimes I just get ever so slightly caught up with something else, and I'm expected to say something, and nothing comes out. It's the moment you gotta take the sour with the sweet, don't you? Someone who's had to take the sour with the sweet as well today, Bram van Eyften, started in a very, very decent 4th place. He's found himself dislodged from the lead pack as well now by 9 seconds. Of course, still very much able to get up in there. It could all happen quickly. The caution here, but we are still a fair bit of laps away from the next planned tire pit stop. If you were out there, would you take a chance on pitting, say, 10 laps earlier than everybody else, to try and gain an advantage at that point of the race?
At that point, yeah, I'd say I would. It'd probably be the better way about trying to get some track position, just making that bigger jump, because we haven't had many cautions, so they've had few chances to get into the pits, which means that those 4 tire sets total, they've still got one to spare to come in. So if they come in a little bit early, they find themselves caught out with a caution, they can come in with everybody else and still come in and take tires. It's as long as they don't get wind up a lap down or two due to the caution being between their pit stops and theirs. But you're not at as big of a risk of finding yourself on older tires with, a few laps to go, as we ride on board with Kim here in the 86, looking back at the group he's been leading along. At this point, you definitely want to try and wait as long as you can, because you want a nice, quick last stint. But I agree with you. Maybe about 10 laps early, come in, try and see if you can catch everybody with their pants down and get a little bit of track position to the checkered flag in this race.
Indeed. Leaving up the beak, coming in to the pits. Is in a few laps down already. He was also in a little bit earlier than the rest of the pack. Still stat quo here for the top 3. Hendrik de Grave, though, has lost just about another second. Passing now 5.3 seconds of an advantage from him to the car ahead. 5.5 to the leader. That's just something about just how close these 3 drivers as well been here. Manny Sufi, one of the drivers we've seen play his part at the front of the field and affairs, but he hasn't really been the one to make all the moves. He hasn't been aggressive at all. Like a very, very measured drive and a very measured approach from him. And I think once we get into the final 20 laps or so, we'll see it all heating up at the front of affairs. The battle for position becomes real, so to say, all of a sudden, knowing that that any positions gained now, at this point of the race, it might sound like it's a banality, but any positions gained here with over 60 laps of racing still to go, it's just as easily lost, so might not really be worth it in the end. Is that right?
Exactly, and it's funny you mentioned, making it sound banal, but people often complain about, Formula One can be so boring, there's nothing happening, but if you know the strategy, you understand the chess match, and you see the tension in that. Oval racing can very much be like that sometimes, like this, where it is this chess match. You talked about earlier the minutia of what you got to deal with out there, the tiny things that you can do that can make that difference at these speeds. And that's what these drivers are doing at the moment. And speaking of which, I think we're going to be seeing a battle for fifth, because I was looking at the lap times between the 86 and the 211, and they're actually catching that second group.
Yeah, they are indeed. That is a very good point. It's down to 1.4 seconds, and it's coming down by the lap. So, and that makes you wonder if they're actually going to be able to catch back on to the leaders as well, because the entirety of this pack, at the moment, lapping 0.2 of a second quicker than the leading trio as well.
Ooh.
So all of these 5 cars in the end really could be in with a shout if it stays like this, or even if it stays like this, because obviously any cautions bring him back quickly into it as well. And now you see him coming back very, very quickly indeed. Last lap, 0.4 of a second quicker. These two drivers, I have a sneaking suspicion they've been holding off for a bit here. Both de Grave and Sepp Hebra. Taking it easy might not be the correct way to put it, but just taking it smoothly would probably be the way to put it on the steering wheel inputs.
Oh, they've already got the draft now. It's half a second between them. I think Kim's going to be running them down this time by.
And that would be the perfect thing to do as well. Just take advantage of the slingshot effect that you get when coming from distance. You can go right past and hopefully keep the momentum that they're carrying at the moment. Maybe even start working together. The two Flemish cars here could see each other as valuable help in terms of trying to close the now almost 6 seconds that are actually a little bit over 6 seconds to the head of the field. And that's something we're going to be following closely as well. We are edging ever so slightly closer to lap 100 here in the Viraco Las Vegas 160 on Simracersworld TV. Of course, my name is Hasse Rømer. I'm joined by Joe Peak in the commentary booth tonight for this race that has presented us with a long and nice period of green flag racing. And it's also something I feel like, Joe, that they don't come around that often, these races that presented with a green flag period this long, and we've seen it before with drivers simply just being so used to basically only pitting under caution that those green flags pit stops can cause a bit of trouble sometimes.
Yeah, it's something you have to practice. The pit entry especially, and the exit can be tricky because you're coming out on those cold tires, don't forget, and you're coming in on worn tires. It's a bit of a rough transition. It's not the hardest place to try and get your speed down and pit, but you definitely are coming in from such a high speed. You got to know the exact limits, or else you'll see situations like we did in this last set of stops. There were some losers and gainers for no apparent reason, because we saw there was pretty much exact same pit stop times for some drivers, and yet some wound up a whole 2 seconds down the road. Looks like the 86 now hooking up with his teammate is up to the front of this group. And this is the first side-by-side racing we've had for what, about 20, 30 laps here?
Something like that, but it's true. It's really settled in, and it's now these drivers sort of have to catch up to that lead trio. For the lead trio, it's all about not making any wrong moves, more than it is about making the one genius move that's going to lead or win you the race, gain you the lead. That part of the race very much still to come, but expect things to become very, very much heated at the end of affairs. As always, as we talked about earlier, is that chess match that leads up the final 20-25 laps, where it's all then settled upon. You just want to get yourself into those 25 laps in the best possible position, where you'll be in with a shout to take the win at the end, without really risking too much along the way.
If I'm looking at this correctly, Hendrick has actually picked up the pace. Now that Kim has joined, this second group is actually going faster, but Hendrick was leading before, so I'm not sure if this is just a case of power in numbers or what, but they are definitively quicker now. Indeed,
I think it could be a team effort from the Flemish cars. We've seen them really make use of this teamwork before, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them just making sure they team up and doing it at a time where they can still really get that advantage. Of course, it is an advantage having a block of cars behind you as well that can bump draft and that can take away a bit of air behind you as well, that in my understanding at least helps take away some of the drag.
It does indeed.
But it's going to be a little bit minuscule, but minuscule is enough, and the gap is coming down rapidly though. Looking at the lap times, 3/4 tenths here on one lap, on the last lap alone, which is why we're seeing that gap to the leading trio tumble down at the moment, and it's come down to just about 4 seconds from 6 seconds, and that's just been in the space of a few minutes here. So if it continues on like this, coming into the final pit stop, we're gonna see these two groups merge together, and we're gonna have basically a 10-way fight for the win at the end of it. It looks like.
Yeah, that is going to be thrilling to watch. However, if we get anybody trying to play a different strategy, that time is coming up quickly. Lap 110 would be the early stop that we were mentioning earlier. 120 would be them running the fuel tanks dry. So look at, I mean, they could actually come in now if they wanted, since they could make it on 60 laps. But again, the earlier you pit, the more you put yourself at risk of going laps down due to a caution. So you kind of have to figure out how much you want to roll the dice, and you have to consider how much older tires you're going to have come the end of the race. So the drivers you might have gotten a jump on will have better rubber than you later on. You have to pay the piper at some point.
And I also think that if they, having had the race that we've had so far, I don't think any driver's really gonna bank on there being caution periods, even at the end of the race.
You wouldn't think so.
No, because we haven't had any so far. So it would be a bold choice, I think, to go down that route. Of course, could be the one to really gain it all. If we end up with a late caution, and you can indeed go in for that tire stop with 10-15 laps to go, having pitted 10-15 laps earlier than everybody else could be the thing that seals the deal and wins you the race. And that's what we've been talking about earlier as well, with just how much the strategy means here on the oval here. Now the 777, that's Paul Gosling and Ian Roots, I think. No, I'm sorry, that's Seb Herber and the 211, of course. Roots is behind in the 194. There's the 999 of John Tusting, very much there as well. And just to check back in on the advantage, now you can see the gap. That's all there is, 2.3 seconds, and the Flemish cars are flying. They've got Bram van Uyften for company as well. And the 284, a little bit of a gap then down to Sepp Herberer. Although when I say a little bit, it's 0.3 of a second, so it should be manageable for Sepp. But that's one of the things here. Once you get just a little bit of a gap, it just looks so massive. And of course, slipstream as well. All the better part of a second means it'll actually be something that affects you far down. Which of course does make sense given the speed these machines are moving at. Punch a rather hefty hole in the air as they go through.
It is. And for those that are just joining, for reference, that gap was at near 6 seconds apart. Now that it's down to 1.3, it's rare that I've seen, especially on a fixed setup series, that kind of gap be made up on a track where the lap is flat out. This is some impressive stuff.
It really is, and it just brings the question to mind if John Barnes has been holding something back in order to play his cards safely, that you would have to just wonder if your take on it, Joe, and I think that take is very much correct as well, because we did see them go quite hard at the early part of this second stint, and they might just be paying for it in terms of tire life here. The question is if there's going to be enough time for these other drivers to actually be able to do something about it before we come into the pits, while they still have a bit of an advantage here, or just how everything is going to look once we've had this next round of pit stops over with and the final stint underway. It's going to be the decisive stint in the end. Oh, was that the... It sounded like wall to me, but I don't think it was.
I did see Goossens is in, I think, in the 369, but he pitted early last time, if I remember correctly, so this isn't too surprising. Not sure if that caused some noise when he banged back down onto the concrete. There you can see he's back out on track. Yeah, you know, the interesting thing about this, if this is a case of the top three used up their stuff early and paid for it here late in the stint, they just about timed it to perfection, because it's only 6 laps before everybody's pitting anyways. So they got caught, but they haven't really lost anything out of it.
No, it's true. It's sort of equaling one another out right about now. It looked to be advantage for those three. They'd all come in a little bit earlier than a lot of the rest of the pack here that seems to have that little bit extra life in the tires. Now they're starting to battle for it. And someone is pitting in early here. That is, I think
is he going to make it, though? He's very hot. That's De Greve.
It looks to me he's made it. I'm not quite sure if that's the case, but we'd have to expect so. An experienced driver, and as such,
he did. I double checked. He made it to the pit speed limit.
Just about, probably, but kudos indeed to Henrik. And let's see if the reaction's going to come immediately from the rest of them here. Greater X on the high side. Yeah. Oh, they've collected
this
one
could be
another.
Our caution.
And yeah. There we have it. No, not yet. Yellow flags are...
He's off.
He is indeed off. And majorly so as well. He comes into the pit here, but the yellow flags have not come out. So even with this up into the wall, Bram van Hoeften comes around. Scary moment for everybody. That cone gets knocked a fair bit of distance. And I'm afraid Bram van Hoeften's going to pick up a penalty as well for this pit entrance. Not quite sure how that's going to work out, but I think it's going to be a penalty. I'm quite sure of that. That was very, very close to being a caution, but I think the saving grace on the continued green running here, and the fact that there's so much apron on the inside all the way around the track, and that for most of the time it seems that we haven't had drivers coming to a complete stop on the track as well. I'm wondering, yeah, that's Behate and the SRW esports car of Sepp Herberer.
And critically, Hendrick, with his early stop, has left them well far behind. It's about a 1.5 gap already to those back there. And he's going to obviously do the same to those that he's going by right now, who are just exiting the pits. So Hendrick actually is looking like he's going to be the one. No, Sufi. He's just caught Sufi. So Sufi did the same, somehow is able to be up with him, even though he pitted a lap later.
Yeah, indeed. And Greatorex was in on lap 117, and you can see how he's lost time on it. Van Eyften's still in there. Ian Roots, I'm afraid, could have been caught up in what we saw earlier. Here's the incident again. That's Van Eyften. He's going to come down across, and we're just going to see if it has any additional effects, because he made contact with someone. It doesn't,
Let's see if I can...
doesn't seem like there was anything else except for a bit of a touch, sent him into the wall, and then his big slide down there across. But indeed, Paul Gosling is now in third position. They lost 2 seconds. You can see Greatorex side by side with Herberus still going for it. John Barnes, for the first time, not leading anymore. 40 laps left to run here. If you stay green for the remainder of these 40 laps, it's going to be 20 more minutes or so. And how do you think John Barnes is going to feel about sitting where he's sitting right now, given that he's been leading for so long?
Oh, he's got to be a little bit frustrated, wondering what happened that put him back in this position. Honestly, I put it down again to the pit stops. I could have swore we'd get some more drivers in. But I know you were joking about drivers thinking we won't get a caution. You saw how easy it is for that to just flip upside down with Van Eyften, who just found himself suddenly hitting the wall and having to try and catch it coming in. If it wasn't for the grass on the inside and the tri-oval, that would have been a caution.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, we're going to Phoenix next week, and then it's going to see.
Phoenix
and
is
then
a lot tighter. Yeah,
Phoenix is first of all a lot tighter, and then the week following that we're going to Bristol, which is tight on a different scale. So I'd say it's something very, very different. That is certainly going to be eventful, to say the very least, that far. But Sufi de Greve now in a beautiful position, sitting on this 2-second advantage down to Gosling, Greatorex, Barnes, Herber, Behate, and John Tusting. Though Kim Behate and John Tusting, both of them having been dislodged as well. So it's beginning to slim down now, Joe, in terms of which drivers are going to be in with a shot come the end of this one.
So Behate, I think part of the reason he's lost touch, he was involved in that incident there that we had on the pit entry. So he copped some damage from that. And then Sufi was the other one, but Matt seems to have gotten away lucky because I don't see anything on that car and he's still leading the way. That said, I'm looking at the lap times here, and Gosling is running quicker than those top two.
Very, very good point indeed. I'm just going to see if I can... Back to just
for an onboard
before.
here,
Nah, I'm just looking for that earlier because... Oh, there it is. I think Sufi got a slight touch as well, and another touch to the rear end of Kim Behate's machines. You have to wonder if that aero damage is going to be enough to slow him down.
Oh, it absolutely is. A track like this, Arrow's going to be king.
Yeah.
So he's suffering.
That's such a shame as well. But in order to finish first you must finish. And you gotta finish with a car that's able to be competitive all the way through. If not, you're in for a tough one here, and Greatorex just trying to get past on Paul Gosling. To find the space, move on up through. Now, of course, they'll know that they still have time to move up and close the gap on the leaders. Saying that, the gap's gone down by half a second. down to 1.5 seconds, meaning that this pack is going to be back within the slipstream of the leading duo. At least if this trend continues, then within, well, just a few laps basically, and it could all open up once again.
Yeah, frankly, if I'm Greaterix, I'm not fighting Gosling right now. I'm working together. We saw what could happen with that second pack last time that gobbled everybody up. Well, effectively a third pack that gobbled up the second pack and then chased down the leaders. That tells you anything right there. So yeah, these four, I think, need to link up. They need to try and push hard as well as they can and try and get those top two, because they were quicker before they started battling. I'm checking the lap time now, and now they're starting to even out. So because they've started squabbling a bit, they're costing themselves.
That is not something they can afford at this moment of the race. I was about to say at this hour of the race, but it's been going for just over an hour, so that would maybe be a slightly unfitting expression to use, but certainly it has been a quick race indeed, given that we haven't had any caution period so far. I'm knocking a bit of wood, I'm crossing my fingers, I'm sitting in my living room, I'm not going to spit over my right shoulder. That's the level we're at here. I want to see this
Is that a Danish thing?
Spitting over the right shoulder? I think it's very much a Danish thing. I think it's also done in other European countries for good luck. Yeah.
That's a new one on me. Okay.
Spitting over your right shoulder. That's supposed to negate bad luck, I think, more than it's supposed to bring you good luck. So.
Yeah, these guys are going to have to be doing that as well. They don't mind in their virtual cockpits, I'm sure, making a bit of mess like that. And they are getting back into it. They've cut the time down yet again. So I think they've got the message. Either somebody's listening to the broadcast or someone got in their ear and said, "What are you doing? You've got a shot at this. Don't mess it up trying to fight over third place."
That would be a big shame, and not to call anyone defeatist, but sort of a defeatist attitude to try and defend third place instead of going for gold and trying to really get in there up ahead. Now look at Henrik de Grave. He's trying to muscle his way in on the outside. As they're passing, I think that's Ian Roots, and here he comes. Oh, he's gonna squeeze his way through, isn't he? Oh, they touch it. That's gonna be the caution of Fred. Oh, Sufi, how does he catch that? I have absolutely no clue. Matty Sufi with the save of the season. Oh, my word.
Marvelous car control, but the downside is he's cost himself the caution he needed in that situation. Now he's got no way to catch them up. Look at this. The 87, I think he kind of chopped down. Let's watch here in the slow-mo.
Catch the correct moment.
No, I take that back. No, he drifted up.
Sufi drifts up into him, but how he manages to keep that, I have no idea whatsoever. But it's certainly going to cost Matty Sufi the race. If there's any damage to the car, which there very well could be, it was a minor contact. It could be enough to just have knocked something off a little bit. That was a major save indeed. That has, though, brought the front of the race all the way together. And now it's an open fight between what I see as 5 drivers for the win of this race. 26 laps to go. It's the Grave, Gosling, Greaterix, Barnes, and Seb Herbera. And actually, that's Matty Sufi as well. He's just ever so slightly off. You have to say, I think one of the drivers in here, that's Roots. Yeah, that's Roots in the 194.
He's a lap car.
So he's a lap car, which is why you're seeing 6, but only 5 of them in with a real shout here. We'll be monitoring Sufi's lap times closely.
If I'm Gosling, I'm not real keen on Ian being there right now. I'm asking him. See, and Ian realizes it. He knows it's late in the race. 25 laps to go. There's only one other car on the same lap as him, so it's not worth him trying to get this lucky dog by getting involved in this incident. And honestly, he's still going to get it just by hanging back here at the tail. So he did the right thing. Gosling now has a straight fight between himself and De Greve, and he's going to take it right away.
Very much so. Look at this brilliant stuff. And we've got front row seats riding on board here with Seb Herbera in his Ford. as they are really beginning to pick up the fight here. As we said, within the final 25 laps, this is when it all really begins to count and the real fighting can begin. And a lot of the drivers will have been waiting for this moment to arise, and all of a sudden you can see the Graves just losing positions. But whereas every other time we've seen people bleed positions there on the high line, this time it's the low line breathing, but the Grave gets it on the inside there of John Barnes. John Barnes very much back with it there, but the Grave comes up the inside. Barnes stays very high, and as such, I don't think he's going to be able to keep the position. Greater X up into second now, led by Paul Gosling. And what a surprise that would be if the 777 would run away with it. In there, but only just thereabouts.
The other thing I think maybe we're seeing a bit of with some of these cars, they are running quite close, which you can understand now late at the race, but the side draft is a possibility at a track like this. You can slow up your rival by getting right up to them. It's a bit dangerous, and it takes a lot of trust and skill, but that you can get it done. And De Graves is really just not got anything under him now that he's been caught. He's going to have to regroup and try to get a little tricky. Maybe hope that he can get some help. If anything, maybe I'd say I'd get on the radio to Roots and say, "Hey, you want to help push me to the front here?"
I think it would be past him. It is, but mind you, Roots, of course, are part of the Alpha team. The other car are part of the Bravo. Gosling, Greaterix, Barnes, De Grave, and Hebera are the 5 drivers. 20 laps to go. Equates to 10 minutes of green flag running. It'll be over all before you know.
And incredibly, we still have 8 drivers left on the lead lap. Now, granted, I wouldn't say all of them are in it for the win at this stage, not unless we get a caution. But the way that things have been going, and as tense as it's starting to look out there, again, you cannot assume that a caution will not happen. There's always a chance that things will unravel around you that way.
Something we've seen as well before with the late cautions brings the absolute drama. What we haven't seen before is a race going green all the way to the final laps, then to have the late caution. It's something we've yet to experience in this series. We've seen races go green from start to finish. Haven't had a race 160 laps go green for say 150 of those. Then have all the drama, I mean, at this late stage of the race. First for everything, they say. Let's see if that first is tonight. And I'm sure that Paul Gosling isn't gonna be hoping so. But on the other hand, if they come into the final 5 laps and Paul Gosling's still leading, oh, that was a very close, very, very twitchy moment there between John Barnes and Hendrik de Grave. But Gosling, could he be a sitting duck if they come into the final few laps and he's still in the lead? Or maybe put it another way, do you really want to be leading into the final 3, 4, 5 laps?
Well, this is so hard to tell because we haven't seen too many making moves here at the end. At the start of the race, there were definitely a lot of guys that were bobbing and weaving and easily able to overtake. Getting to the end of the stint when the tires are more worn, I'm not sure if those runs will be as effective. Often I've heard drivers say, because I'll admit I'm definitely not the fastest guy out there, and all the fast guys always tell me I'd rather be leading and up front than try to play some tricky stuff and sitting behind. So perhaps this is something where Greater X needs to get up in front of him, and they're going to be joined possibly by De Grave, who's still fighting with Barnes, and he loses out.
Such a close call there, as De Grave doesn't want Sepp Herbert to get up his inside. And he's doing everything in his power to make sure that it doesn't happen. Indeed, it just about makes it in front without causing the contact here. Paul Gosling is doing a good job of defending it so far. The lap times 31.2 at the moment, so sort of what we expect. The fact that they've been out for close to something like 40 laps.
Yeah, this is definitely towards the latter half of the stint for everybody. So the tires are going to be pretty worn. And everybody's going to be mentally tired as well. Let's not forget, they've only had those 2 pit stops. Otherwise, it's been flat out and concentrating hard, inches away from all your rivals for 148 laps of green flag racing.
It says something about the standards of the series as well, that it's a field of drivers that gone to know one another quite well. The drivers seem to getting to that level where you sort of know the reactions of the other drivers in certain situations, and you get a little bit more accustomed to one another. We can see Greater X is in that danger zone where, indeed, Paul Gosling not really wanting to commit to getting it under. There's the contact. Oh, and once again they've held it.
Heber, unfortunately, having to check up. So all 3 of those behind are essentially out of the running. 4. Well, that's a lap car, the 284, so he wasn't in the first place. Now, there's 2. Let's take another look at this. My goodness.
Yeah, we're going to see. I don't think it was... No, it wasn't indeed my mistake on bringing up the wrong pictures. This one should be the one we're looking for. Might just take a few seconds because there wasn't any incident. Oh, there it is. Oh, major moment for the grave. He does indeed touch. Is that John Barnes that he touched with there in that situation? I think that actually is.
Yes.
And they're now a second and a half off of the 2 leaders. Gosling and Greater X has been left with 10 laps to go here and a second and a half. Do you reckon they have a chance to catch up to this behind? Or will this be a 2-up sprint for the 9 now?
Unless they get a caution, I don't think it's happening. I just looked at the last lap. Barnes ran a 31.6, and Greater X did a 31.4. So unless that changes in the next couple laps, you can count out everybody except those top 2.
That's how little it takes for 3 of the 5 drivers that didn't have a shot at the win all of a sudden find themselves more or less fighting for scraps. What's going to be left of it? Last 9 laps here. And they are continuously losing out.
So Greater X definitely has been getting some runs here and there. And that's honestly what predicated all that craziness that we saw coming into turn 1, is he had a bit of a run, but then he got held low. He scrubbed some speed off. Everybody behind him saw an opportunity, scrambled, and that's what caused the contact eventually. So now Greater X doesn't have to worry about that. Now he can experiment a little bit more, but I'm surprised to see him not really doing as much as he was before, where he's kind of taking practice runs and poking his nose just to see what the car can do. If I was him, I'd start trying to hang back a little bit and then pull forward, see how much it's going to take, try and test it, and figure out exactly how much momentum I'm going to need to try and make this stick.
It's a good point. Because what he finds himself doing right now is sort of getting too close at the apex of the banking, and that's not going to help him past. If he comes from that little bit further back, oh, that's a bit of a blink for Gosling, and there he's back. And that's not something we want to see too much of at this stage.
Oof, he's continuing to do that. Yeah, it's frustrating enough on the road side. On the oval side, it almost makes it impossible to pass, because you can't know if they're going to reappear at just the wrong point, or the dreaded net code that you'll find the car coming back not exactly where the computer thinks it's not where it exactly is, and it'll send you spinning. So this makes life all the tougher for Austin.
Seems Paul Gosling's connection is a little unstable. I was just about to say it seems it's fixed, and I seem to have jinxed that one, though. Well done.
It's the first time I've seen commentators curse happen on an internet connection.
Yeah, it seems my curse works on a different level. been a pure blood wizard or something as well myself here, as we're following Greater X around. Oh, he'll be frustrated with this. If he sees this as we see it, of course, no guarantees there, but if that's the case, he will be so frustrated. 4 laps to go. And of course, Paul Gosling, well, he might not even know that he's blinking like he is for the rest of the field. Of course,
I haven't seen any communication over the radio between them, so if he doesn't know, or if nobody's told him over Discord or some other program, then yeah, oh wow, and this is getting to be longer and longer blinks. Something is going wrong. He's got to get somebody to go over and kick the modem.
Imagine a last lap disconnect. Oh, I did not say that, but of course we're just. Oh, there you go. No.
You said it, not me.
No, I did say that. I shouldn't have. My apologies.
Oh boy. And what is Austin doing all of this too? He wants that win, but how do you time the run? He's not getting as much of a draft either. That makes the runs even harder right now. 2 to go. I have no idea how this is going to wind up.
Do you reckon it's Paul Gosling with the strategic blinking? Oh, here he comes on the outside. Greater X is trying for it. With the blinking, though, he's sort of unsure, I think, of what to make of it. Oh, a little bit of a loose moment there for Gosling.
He's protecting the inside. He's trying to make him go the long way around. He is hugging that white line.
We're now on to the final lap. Here is the battle for 3rd place as well, with the Grave trying to go the long way around John Barnes. And we have to wonder just how that's going to work out up ahead. It's still going to be Paul Gosling ahead of Greater X into the final turn. They come. He might have him locked up. We have to see if Greater X is going to be able to make it around, which I'm not quite sure. He doesn't get the launch. He doesn't get the sling, does he? No. And it's going to be a win for Paul Gosling. The 777 takes the checkered flag at the end of it. Hendrik de Grave is going to have a sprint indeed. And it's going to be John Barnes. My mistake. It's going to be Hendrik de Grave by the narrowest of margins, taking 3rd place ahead of John Barnes. Then Hebra Sufi is going to come home for 6th place in the end. Kimbe Hayes 7th. Husting 8th. Roots 9th. And Fredericks rounding off the top 10. And that was a very, very good finish indeed.
8 thousandths of a second for 3rd and 900ths of a second for the win. As we watch that last lap one more time, you can see again he's trying to size him up. He's trying to make a pull on him, but just didn't quite get it. I feel like he should have been starting this a lot sooner, and I do think some of this was affected by that blinking, because he wasn't sure what to do in that situation. There's the run. He might have actually gotten held up a little bit off of 4 as well.
Yeah, it certainly looked that way, like he wasn't being able to really complete the slingshot. There it was, all the way to the line.
And he's going to burn him down.
Paul Gosling, the 777, takes the win. And with that said, gonna see if we are already joined by drivers for interviews. We are not yet, so we can just bring up some race results on your screen. Right about there. There it is. Paul Gosling by less than a 1/10 of a second, and as you said, tiniest of margins for 3rd as well there for Hendrik de Grave. Well as John Barnes, of course. Austin Greater 2nd there in the end for Quantum. Seb Herber in 5th, Maddie Sufi in 6th place ahead of Kimbe Hayes, Jan Tusting, and Ian Roots, with Eve Fredericks rounding off the top 10. Then Jens Husens 11th, leaving up the big in 12th. Bram van Eyck in 13th ahead of Kurt van Onaga, Adam Wright, Stuart Musselwhite, and Damien van Immerziel, who of course did disconnect as the rest of the field was gridding. So unluckiest of drivers, dare I say. But green flag from start to finish here, even despite of a few relatively well, relatively big incidents indeed. Not in terms of how many cars was in it, but some big crashes on their own, big hits of the but green from start to finish, and a very, very close finish.
Thrilling stuff, and no cautions the entire way through. You mentioned Van Emmerseel. He's the one that's got to be going, you're kidding me. The one time that we don't get any cautions and I get no chances for lucky dogs, and this is the one.
Yeah, that's it's a tough pill to swallow. Anyway, we are about ready. Get in some drivers for these interviews that we love doing post-race, and we're going to start out with our third place finisher for Flemish Sim Sports, Hendrik de Grabe. Hendrik, what a race. Really close all the way through. A tight squeeze there, and a bit of a dodgy moment that seems to take you and John and Seppe Heber as well out of contention. But what a run for the Lion to grab the final podium spot.
Yeah, good evening, guys. It was a very close one in the end. First of all, I had this little touch with Mathieu. We still have to look at it, but I'm not sure if I came down or if he came up. And after that, I had a touch with John, which was, I think, my fault, but I haven't seen the replay yet. But I think I made a little mistake there. But yeah, that finish was really close.
Indeed, it did look like on the first touch with Mathieu that it was his car getting loose on the inside. At least that was from the commentator's perspective. It will, of course, leave all these decisions to the stewards. Were you expecting to see a green flag run throughout here at Las Vegas specifically? Or were you surprised to see the race go green from lights to black?
I was actually very surprised that it went green from start to end, because this is not an easy track, but yeah, on the new cars it's a bit easier. But it's very nice to see a full green race. I think everybody's experience is actually improving, so that's really great.
Well, thanks for joining us for a post-race talk, Hendrik. It was an absolute pleasure, and of course we hope to see you again here in the booth another time soon. Before we let you go, is there anyone you'd like to give a thanks or shout out to as per SRW TV tradition?
Yes, of course, my teammate Kim, and also our sponsor of the evening, Viraco, which is also our main sponsor. So thank you very much for that.
Well, indeed. And thanks goes from us here in the booth as well to both you and to Viraco. Wonderful. I did check out their webpage, and it does look like drool-worthy material. And the stuff of dreams, to say the least.
Yes, it looks very nice.
Anyway, Hendrik, thanks for joining us, and we'll be moving on to our next interviewee, and that'll be Joe Peak having a bit of a word with Austin Greatorex.
Yeah, Austin. So let's talk about the end of that race, because from our end, it looked like Paul had a lot of connection problems. Was that showing up on your screen as well?
Hi there, guys. Yes, it was. So Paul is actually in the chat with me and the other two Quantum drivers, and I was actually letting Paul know that if I wiped us both out, it was on him for blinking.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was such a source of frustration at the end, because I saw you start to make a few little practice runs on him before you almost got caught out by the guys that came in behind, and then they had their incident. But then after that, I didn't see you do many more little runs up to see kind of what pace you had to try and overtake him. What caused you to stop doing that? Was it the blinking, or was there something before that made you say, okay, I've got enough, I'm going to wait till the last couple laps now?
Mainly the fact that I've had two bad results and I didn't want to ruin another result. I DNF'd at Daytona and I screwed myself over with a penalty last week. So they were the two big reasons. And then with Paul's blinking, I didn't want to get too close. At some points he was riding the wall on my screen, so if he drifted wide, I didn't want to put my nose in because I wouldn't have seen it and taken us both out, knowing that we had such a clear gap over the other few drivers behind in the end.
That's completely understandable. Well, knowing that and having turned around some of your fortune, are you pleased with the second place?
Yes and no. So that last stop, I actually overshot the pits box and had to reverse. Otherwise, I think I may have come out close to the lead, which could have put me more in the hunt. And it's disappointing not to get the lead when you run so close for so long. But as said, Paul's a surrogate member of our team as such, so it's still good that he got the win.
Speaking of those stops, 2 green flag stops, no cautions the whole way through. Was anybody in this group expecting that here?
Oh, definitely not within our group. Because I know there was one quite early on, there was a wreck, and Paul was towards the back, then he called it out, but no caution. I see the one in my mirror into pit entrance. I don't know who that was then, but I see them dive across the pits, and obviously being on the infield, I knew it wasn't a yellow. And then when there was the bit of contact at the very end between John Barnes and I'm not sure which other driver it was, I thought, please don't throw one up now. But I think that's probably the first ever oval race I've ever ran and never had a caution.
And 160 laps to boot, so it certainly wasn't a short one. Regardless, a podium to your name once again this season. Is there anybody that helped make this one happen?
Just the team, really. I jump in literally as practice opens for the session. I don't do no practice. I run mainly road racing, so more days of practicing that. It's just a bit of fun because the Quantum boys needed a third person for the team. So mainly them more than anything. Just talking me through it. We're all talking throughout, helping each other.
Well, I say you've got something in oval racing in your future if you want it. It's a great performance and congratulations.
Thank you very much, guys. And thank you for you lot for doing the broadcast. All of Simracersworld for running the league, and as I said, my Quantum team.
Thank you. That was our second place finisher, Austin Greatorex. Hasse, who do you have with you?
Well, I have our race winner for the day, Paul Gosling. What a finale! And the bit of blinking aside, which you were probably being told as well by Austin, how did you experience those final few laps?
Yeah. Evening, guys. Austin did mention it. I wasn't seeing anything on my side, but a bit concerning. I'll be keeping an eye out for that. But yeah, those last few laps were pretty intense.
And sitting in a place early in the race where you were sort of further down the field and of course in a danger zone and also around one of the early incidents in the race, were you expecting to actually be able to be in there with a shout, even though we had a green flag all the way to the line?
Yeah, I got hung out at the very beginning there and went right to the back. That first stint was just conservation. After that first stop, I was able to make a bit of progress through the field. And then on that second stop, I just got a little bit lucky. I think John and maybe even Austin both just overshot their boxes a tiny bit, so I just came out ahead of them. And those guys helped me, and we managed to push our way to the front.
And with Tim Perry out to miss a few more rounds before he'll be making a return in the second half of the season, it's very much still an open fight, given that it's a brand new open fight for the lead after this round. Are you considering yourself as being in with a shot with the overall title after tonight?
You never know. I'm probably not the only one that sort of noted that Tim wasn't going to be in a few rounds, and there's a sort of group of us that tend to run a decent pace, not too far behind Tim, and so we'll have to see how the season plays out.
Indeed, Paul, congratulations on a great race win here tonight. We're gonna let you go and celebrate in style with donuts and milk and all that NASCAR stuff. Before we let you do that, is there anyone you'd like to give a thanks or a shout out to?
You guys in the booth, as always, and absolutely Austin and John for giving us a good old nudge there at the end.
Well, thank you as well, Paul, for taking the time to take a post-race interview. It's been a pleasure having you in, and I hope to see you again in the booth soon.
Yeah, it's open. See you guys.
Cheers, man. So that was Paul Gosling, our race winner for tonight, and that is going to be the conclusion of our broadcast for tonight as well. Joe, any sort of final statements from you on what we've seen on track tonight?
I just want to say that while we like to joke and kid around about, oval racing is an American thing, I think this crowd proved that you guys can race just as well across the pond on circle tracks. That was an impressive display to have a full 160-lap green flag race here at Las Vegas, and not with everybody puttering around. There was close, hard racing, everybody working their darndest to take the victory, and gave us a less than a tenth of a second win at the end. So can't complain about that.
I can only co-sign to that. A great race to watch here from the booth. I hope you've enjoyed it at home as well. My name is Hasse Rømer, and it has been my absolute pleasure having you along, Joe. I hope you'll be able to join sometime in the future again here in the SRW NASCAR Cup Series.
Thank you. I'd be glad to be back.
Well, that concludes the broadcast from, well, Las Vegas, and for tonight as well, a mighty big thank you to our sponsor Viraco, and go check out their webpage. Link is, of course, in the description below. With that said, from Hasse Rømer and Joe in the booth here, well, for tonight, take care, and until next time, have fun.